set the events of the accident in motion. Once the 5017 was shut down, air wasn't being cycled through the train. The main air reservoirs were slowly being depleted, and at 056, the air pressure had dropped so much that the air brakes and handbrakes couldn't hold the train any longer, and it very slowly began to roll down the 1.2% grade toward Lac Megantic, just 7 miles away. A witness recalled watching the train moving slowly without the locomotive's headlights on, nor hearing the prime movers of the locomotives. Even someone with no knowledge of trains would know something was wrong. The track was also not equipped with track circuits to alert the dispatcher of a runaway train.
60 years deep in the North Sea, my story begins, a story of powering forward.
While this was going on, firefighter Jean-Luc Montamy was heading home after helping put out the fire on the 5017. He was stopped at the Quebec Route 161 crossing, located just southeast of where the train began to roll. He stated that the crossing had activated and was warning of an oncoming train, but after waiting for some time, he heard no horn nor saw any trains coming. Thinking it was a malfunction, he proceeded over the crossing, a very reckless move, and just as he finished crossing, the train came thundering by behind him with no lights nor horn as it passed through at high speed. If he had crossed a second later, he would have been hit by the runaway. He then quickly realized it was the same train he had responded to just hours earlier. Not wasting any time, he quickly drove down to Nantes to raise the alarm of the emergency that was unfolding. Gathering more and more speed on the long downhill slope, the train soon entered the town of Lac Megantic at over 65 miles an hour, more than 6 times over the speed limit. Witnesses recalled watching the train passing through downtown at a crossing at high speed with no lights, an infernal noise, and sparks being emitted from the wheels. This was the handbrakes grinding away as the weight of the tank cars and downhill grade overwhelmed them. It was also stated by witnesses that since the train was going so fast, the crossing's lights or bells didn't even activate for it. The rail line in this area is also on a curve and has a speed limit of only 10 miles an hour, as it is located at the west end of the Megantic rail yard, where trains must proceed at slow speed. What happened next was inevitable. The buffer car and 65 tanker cars jumped the track right in the center of town near the Route 161 crossing at Frontenac Street. The impact breaches several of the tanker cars open, causing about 6 million liters of crude oil to spill out and ignite. People on the terrace at the Music Cafe, a bar located next to the center of the derailment site, saw the tankers derail and fled for their lives, as a blanket of oil generated a ball of fire 3 times the height of the downtown buildings in what was described as a tsunami of fire. Between 4 and 6 explosions were reported initially as the tank cars ruptured and crude oil escaped along the train's trajectory. Heat from the fires was felt as far as 2 kilometers away. The glow of the fire was so intense it could even be seen from space, as seen by this infrared image taken by NASA's Sumui NPP satellite. People had to jump from the 3rd floor of buildings in the central business district to escape the fire. As the blazing oil flowed over the ground, it entered the town's storm sewer system and emerged as huge fires towering from over storm sewer drains, manholes, and even chimneys and basements of buildings in the area. 150 firefighters were dispatched to the scene, describing it as looking like a war zone. Some were called from as far away as the city of Sherbrooke, Quebec, with as many as 8 trucks carrying 30 people being dispatched from Franklin County, Maine, in the United States. The engineer of MMA2 had no idea what the hell was going on, but was sure his train was still parked at the top of the hill at Nantes.
Yard is gone. Planes, RJ, are 200 feet high. It's incredible. You can't believe it here. From the river right to the station. What the happened? I don't know.
Try new herbal essences for up to 100% petal soft hair. Untap and enjoy its nourishing formula. Infused with real rose essence. Smells so good, it makes you feel good. And leaves your hair gorgeously petal soft. Herbal essences. Have you tried it yet?
I don't know.
But soon he was given the chilling news.
It's worse than that, my friend. Why? It's your train that rolled down. No. Yes, sir. No, RJ. Yes, sir. Holy yes, sir. That's what I got. It was confirmed at 2:30. At 2:30 that the fuel train rolled down here. Yeah. Oh, tabarnak. And it was secure, RJ, when I left.
The local hospital went into code orange, anticipating a high number of casualties and requesting reinforcements from other nearby medical centers. But at first, they received no seriously injured patients. A Canadian Red Cross volunteer said that there had to be no wounded, they all had to be dead. One off-duty music cafe cook was on the terrace at the time of the derailment and was treated for second-degree burns to one of his arms. About 1,000 people were evacuated initially after the derailment, explosion, and fires, with another 1,000 being evacuated later during the day because of toxic fumes from the smoke. Some took refuge in an emergency shelter established by the Red Cross in a local high school. In a heroic effort, 2 employees of Tafisa, a firefighter, and even the MMA engineer himself, Tom Harding, upon realizing that it was his train, as well as a member of the family-owned excavation company, La Fortiniere and Son, had worked to move 9 tank cars away from the fire, ones that didn't derail. Tafisa, a local particle board industry that moves much of its product by rail, did have a rail car mover which had the capacity to deactivate the brakes on the cars in tow. They used the rail car mover to move the first 5 tank cars away from the fire. When they couldn't find a crossing to move the rail car mover back to the disaster site, they instead used a loader to remove another 4 tank cars, 2 at a time. But because the loader lacked equipment to deactivate the brakes, Harding then told the men to just use the loader to brake the air lines and release the air brakes on each of these 4 cars. The fire would burn for another 2 days straight until it was finally extinguished, but the damage was done. In all, 47 people were killed, most of them in the nearby cafe. 5 bodies were never recovered. Most bodies were badly charred, requiring DNA samples of those missing, as well as dental records for identification. It's very likely some of the bodies were literally vaporized in the explosions. At least 30 buildings were destroyed in the center of town, including the town's library, a historic former bank, and other businesses and homes in the area. In total, 115 businesses were destroyed, displaced, or rendered as uninhabitable. The music cafe was among the destroyed buildings, and 3 of its employees were among the dead or missing. Over the next few days, people were slowly allowed to return to their homes, but at least 20 had no home to return to. Colette Roy-LaRoche, the mayor of Lac-Mégantic, stated,
"We will rebuild our town, but at the same time, we have to accept that it won't be the one we knew. Very old buildings, heritage, and architecture all disappeared, and at the beginning, no one realized the magnitude, and now we are starting to understand the consequences."
As for the locomotives and caboose, they rolled over a half-mile away from the crash site, but stayed on the rails, not suffering any damage. Canada's Transportation Safety Board, or TSB for short, launched an investigation into the cause of the accident and found multiple shocking findings. MMA first claimed that the lead locomotive, 5017, was tampered with after Harding had left, since the locomotive was shut down, thereby disabling the compressor powering the air brakes, which allowed the train to roll downhill into Lac-Mégantic. This was quite obviously false, as it was only shut down by firefighters after an oil fire started on the 5017. But why didn't the handbrakes hold the train? The simple truth was, not enough were applied. Only 7 handbrakes were set. A minimum of 9 was required, and experts say 15 should have been applied in order to hold the train on a grade, even if the locomotive was shut down for whatever reason. As for the air brakes on the train, they are supplied with an air compressor on each locomotive. When a locomotive is shut off, preferably the leader, the compressor can no longer supply air to the brake system. Brake pipes are all connected to each car and the locomotives. When air leaks naturally from the various components, the pressure will obviously drop. If the system is not recirculated with air, the locomotive's air brakes become basically useless. This was something that the track foreman that was set to supervise the train after the fire didn't know about. Had the engineer been allowed to return back to the scene, he very likely could have just fired up one of the other locomotives to keep the air pressure throughout the train. Why he chose 5017 of all locomotives to keep on that night, no one knows, but it's very likely because it was the leader of the consist anyway. However, when the air brake control valves sense a drop in pressure in the brake pipe, usually below 20%, they are designed to slam on in an emergency application for each car. However, in this case, if the rate of leakage was very slow and steady, the automatic brakes won't be applied, as such an event normally happens with stronger leaks, the separation of an air hose, or in the case of a coupling failure from broken couplings or even a derailment. However, it is normal for an engineer parking a train that once the train is stopped, he would apply the brakes on the cars in the train by releasing air from the train line, and then allowing the air in the car's reservoirs to apply the car's brakes. Therefore, if the air was isolated, it wouldn't matter if the brakes applied themselves or not, as they'd already be in the applied position. The train did have locomotives that could automatically restart the air brake system in the event of a brake failure, provided that these locomotives were not shut down, of course. Also, the TSB found that the reset safety control on the lead locomotive was not wired to set the train's brakes on in the event of an engine failure, rendering it pretty much useless. The train could have had a stabilization test performed, but we're going to get to that very soon. As for the locomotives involved, remember how the engineers said the 5017 was having issues? Well, its problems began more than 8 months before the accident. In October of 2012, 5017 was sent to the MMA's repair shops following an engine failure. Because of the time and cost for a standard repair, the fact that finding parts for older General Electric models is rather difficult, not to mention costly, and the pressure to return to the locomotive to service as soon as possible, the engine, instead of receiving a professional repair or being sent to someone that could fix it, they instead performed a very temporary, improper repair by using an epoxy-like material that lacked the required strength and durability of the conditions the locomotive ran in. Unsurprisingly, this quickly failed while in service, leading to issues such as engine surges and excessive black and white smoke out the exhaust. Eventually, the oil pump failed, and oil began to accumulate in the body of the turbocharger,